When a billionaire walked into one of the most powerful rooms in America, he did what he always did. He scanned the room in 3 seconds. He sorted the important people from the unimportant ones. And then he turned his back on a man in a navy blazer, sitting quietly in the 3rd row. That moment, 3 seconds, a turned back, a decision made faster than a heartbeat, cost him more than he could have imagined. Because the man he just dismissed had just written the biggest check in the entire room. But here is the thing that makes this story different from every other story about a powerful person who got it wrong. The man in the navy blazer knew it was happening. He watched it happen. He had watched it happen his entire life. In college recruiting offices, in NBA draft rooms, in boardrooms full of people who looked at him and decided in 3 seconds what kind of person he was. And every single time, he did the same thing. He didn't get angry. He didn't say a word. He just opened his notebook, picked up his pen, and waited. Because he knew something the billionaire didn't know yet. He knew what was inside the sealed white envelope sitting on the main stage. The one the moderator had pointed to that morning and called the day's most important announcement. He knew what was about to happen when that envelope opened in front of 600 of the most powerful people in tech and business in the entire country. He knew exactly what the room was about to find out. And in a few hours, so would the billionaire who turned his back. What happens when that envelope opens will change everything. For the billionaire, for the man in the navy blazer, and for thousands of people whose names nobody in that room even knew yet. Stay with us for the whole story, because the moment that envelope opens is something you will not want to miss. The date is March 14th, 2024. Remember that date, because on that morning, in one of the most powerful rooms in America, the most important person walked in, and nobody noticed. The Moscone Center sits in the Soma neighborhood of San Francisco, 2 blocks from the highway and 6 blocks from the bay. It is a massive building, all glass and steel and serious energy. The kind of place that has hosted Apple developer conferences, Democratic National Committee events, and meetings where the decisions made inside quietly change things you use every day without knowing it. On this particular Thursday morning, the building belongs to the Pacific Horizon Tech Summit. 600 people have paid $25,000 each just to be in the room. Do that math. That is $15 million worth of people before a single word has been spoken or a single slide has been shown. There are founders whose apps sit on your phone right now. There are hedge fund managers who can move a stock price just by picking up the phone. There are 4 people in this room whose faces have been on the cover of Forbes in the last 12 months alone. The air smells like cold brew coffee, leather briefcases, and ambition. This is not a room where people are easily impressed. This is a room where people do the impressing. At 9:47 in the morning, a side door opens. A man walks in. He is wearing a simple navy blazer, dark jeans, clean white sneakers. He has no security guard pushing through the crowd ahead of him. No assistant running in front to make sure the path is clear. No publicist whispering in his ear about who to talk to and who to avoid. Just him. A leather notebook tucked under his left arm. A small, quiet smile on his face. He finds a seat in the 3rd row, slightly left of center. He opens his notebook. He uncaps a pen. He looks up at the stage and he waits. His name is Steph Curry, and almost nobody in the room notices he is there. The ones who do notice do what people always do when they spot a famous athlete somewhere unexpected. They look once, they look twice, they squint slightly, like they are not quite sure if their eyes are right, and then they turn back to their conversations. Because what is Steph Curry doing at a tech summit? He is not on the speaker list. There is no press release about his attendance. The obvious answer, the fast answer, the answer a busy person grabs when they do not have time to look deeper, is simple. He is here to give a speech, shake some hands, take some photos, and leave. That is what athletes do at these things. They show up, they smile, they get the check, and they go back to being athletes. That is the assumption. And in this room full of very smart, very accomplished, very certain people, one man grabs that assumption faster and harder than anyone else. His name is Marcus Tilden. Marcus is 44 years old. He is the founder and CEO of Tilden Capital Group, a venture capital firm based in Palo Alto that manages $4.2 billion in assets. He went to MIT at 17 years old. He sold his first company for $200 million before he was 30. He has been on the cover of Wired magazine. He once told a Bloomberg interviewer, on the record, that he never wastes time on conversations that cannot generate a return. He is not a bad man. He is a fast one, and fast men make fast judgments. Marcus Tilden sees Steph Curry walk through the side door at 9:47 in the morning. He watches for exactly 3 seconds. Then he turns his back and keeps talking. 3 seconds. That is all it was. A turned back. A split-second dismissal. So small and so quick that most people in the room do not even notice it happened. But one person does. A man named Derek Nwosu is sitting at a table near the back of the hall. He is 38 years old. He grew up 7 miles from the Chase Center in Oakland, 7 miles from the court where Curry plays, in the kind of neighborhood where the cable cars don't run and the tech money hasn't arrived yet. Derek watches Marcus turn his back on Steph Curry, and Derek thinks 2 words, very quietly to himself. He knows. Not what Marcus knows. What Marcus doesn't know. Because Derek Nwosu is carrying a secret that will not become public for another 4 hours and 13 minutes. A secret finalized in a conference room in Menlo Park on February 28, 2024, with lawyers and wire transfers and a lot of signatures on a lot of pages. A secret sitting right now inside a sealed white envelope on the main stage table. The same envelope the moderator pointed to at the start of the morning and called, "Today's most important announcement." Derek looks at his watch. He looks at the envelope. He looks at Steph Curry, sitting quietly in the 3rd row with his notebook open and his pen ready, looking for all the world like a man who has been in this exact position before. Underestimated, overlooked, invisible, waiting. Derek almost smiles. 4 hours, he thinks. Just wait. The envelope will not be opened until 2:30 in the afternoon. What's inside it will change everything. For Marcus Tilden, for Derek Nwosu, and for every person in this room who looked at a man in a navy blazer and decided, in 3 seconds, that he didn't belong here. But first, you need to understand who that man really is. There is a gymnasium in Charlotte, North Carolina, that doesn't look like much. Scuffed hardwood floors. Bleachers that creak when you sit on them. A scoreboard on the wall that runs a little slow. The kind of gym that exists in thousands of American towns. Not famous, not special. Not the place you'd expect a legend to begin. But this is where it started. A little boy, 7 years old, shooting basketballs by himself after his father's practice ended. Long after the other players had showered and left. Long after the janitor had started mopping the other end of the floor. Just this small, quiet kid. Too small, everyone said, always too small, putting up shot after shot after shot in the empty gym. His name was Wardell Stephen Curry II. The world would come to know him simply as Steph. His father, Del Curry, played 14 seasons in the NBA. He was a sharpshooter for the Charlotte Hornets, a man with a silky, repeatable jumper and the kind of professional consistency that earns respect without always earning headlines. Del was good, really good. But the basketball world is not always kind to men who are good without being loud about it. Steph watched his father his entire childhood. He watched how Del carried himself, quietly, professionally, without drama. He watched how Del prepared, how he studied opponents, how he took care of his body. He watched how the world sometimes overlooked his father in favor of louder, flashier players. And he absorbed all of it, not with bitterness, with attention. By the time Steph was a teenager, One thing was already completely clear to every coach, every scout, and every person who watched him play. He was too small. That sentence followed him everywhere. It followed him through Charlotte Christian School, where he was the best player on the team but still not considered a top-tier recruit. It followed him when he started reaching out to college programs. Virginia Tech didn't want him at the level he wanted to play. NC State passed. Most of the schools that mattered, the ones with the television contracts and the NBA pipeline and the recruiting rankings, looked at Steph Curry and saw a boy who would get eaten alive in big-time college basketball. He was, at the time, about 6 feet tall and 160 pounds. He shot the ball in a way nobody had ever quite seen before, releasing it from high above his head, faster than seemed physically possible, from distances that most players didn't even attempt. But nobody cared about that, not really, because he was small and slight and fragile-looking, and the conventional wisdom said that conventional wisdom existed for a reason. So Steph Curry ended up at Davidson College. Davidson is a small liberal arts school in Davidson, North Carolina, about 20 miles north of Charlotte. Enrollment under 2,000 students. No football team. Not the kind of school that shows up on ESPN very often. Coach Bob McKillop had been building Davidson's basketball program for nearly 2 decades when Steph arrived in the fall of 2006. McKillop had seen a lot of players. He had a good eye for the thing that statistics don't measure, the thing underneath the physical tools, the thing that lives in a player's chest and shows up most clearly when everything is going wrong. He watched Steph Curry in one workout. He offered him a scholarship the same day. "I saw his eyes," McKillop said later, in an interview that has been quoted many times since. "He wasn't proving himself to me. He was just playing. There's a difference." What happened next is the part that everyone who doubted Steph Curry has had to live with ever since. In March 2008, Davidson College entered the NCAA tournament as a 10 seed. They were not supposed to be there in any meaningful way. They were there to lose politely in the first round and go home. They beat 7-seed Gonzaga in the first round. Then they beat 2-seed Georgetown. Then they beat 3-seed Wisconsin. Then they came within a miracle defensive stop of beating 1-seed Kansas in the Elite Eight. A game played on March 30, 2008, in Detroit, that 57,000 people watched in person and millions more watched on television, mouths open, trying to understand how a 160-pound kid from a school with 2,000 students had taken the country's best program to the absolute edge. Steph Curry scored 25 points in that Kansas game. He finished the tournament having scored 128 points in 4 games, a performance that rewrote what people thought was possible for a player his size at that level. The scouts who had passed on him watched every minute. Some of them still won't talk about it. The 2009 NBA draft came, and the old doubts came with it. The reports said his wrists were fragile, said he was too slight to survive the physicality of the league, said he was a tweener, too small to play shooting guard, maybe not quick enough to run point full-time. The Sacramento Kings passed on him. The Memphis Grizzlies passed. The Oklahoma City Thunder took James Harden ahead of him. The Golden State Warriors took Steph Curry with the 7th pick. 7th. Not because they thought he was a top 5 talent. Many inside the organization weren't sure. But because they needed a shooter, and this kid from Davidson could shoot, and maybe, if he stayed healthy, he could be a decent starter someday. A decent starter. That was the ceiling they saw. You know what happened after that. 4 championships, 2 MVP awards. The unanimous MVP in 2016, the first in NBA history, when his team won 73 games, more than any team had ever won before. An Olympic gold medal in Paris in 2024, just months before he walked into the Moscone Center. He is the greatest three-point shooter the sport has ever seen. Not as an opinion. As a fact, written permanently into the record books, uncontested by anyone who has looked honestly at the numbers. And yet, Go back and read the draft reports from 2009. Read the scout evaluations. Read the analyst columns from 2012, when his ankles kept giving out, and people quietly wondered if the Warriors had made a mistake. Again and again, the same instinct appears in the same words. Too small, too slight, probably not the guy. Steph Curry has spent his entire life in rooms where someone looked at him for 3 seconds and decided he was not the most important person there. He has watched those rooms turn around on themselves more times than he can count. He does not get angry when it happens anymore. He does not get impatient. He gets very, very still, and he waits for the work to speak. In a few hours, inside the Moscone Center, in front of 600 of the most powerful people in tech and venture capital, the work is about to speak very loudly. But there is one more thing you need to know first, because Steph Curry is not just a basketball player who invests on the side. He hasn't been for a long time. But before we get to what Steph Curry became outside of basketball, you need to understand the man sitting 5 rows behind him in the Moscone Center. Because this story has 2 main characters, and the second one matters just as much as the first. Marcus Tilden was not born rich. That is the first thing his publicist always makes sure journalists know. And it is true. And it is also the kind of truth that people use as armor, something to hold up when the world starts asking uncomfortable questions about who you became. He grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, in a 3-bedroom house on a quiet street, where the lawns were neat and the conversations were careful. His mother was a structural engineer. His father designed software systems for defense contractors. They were not wealthy. They were precise. There is a difference, and in the Tilden household, that difference was everything. His mother kept a whiteboard in the kitchen, not for grocery lists, not for family schedules, for problems, real problems, math problems, logic problems, optimization problems. Every Sunday evening, she would write a new one on the board. The rule was simple. If you could solve it before Monday morning, you didn't have to do dishes for the week. Marcus solved it every single time. Not because he loved winning the dishes contest, but because an unsolved problem on a whiteboard felt to him the way a splinter feels to most people. Small, irritating, impossible to ignore until it was gone. His father tracked every household expense in a color-coded spreadsheet that he updated every Friday night without fail. Not because the family was struggling, but because he believed, genuinely, deeply believed, that attention was the most valuable resource a person had, and that spending it without tracking it was the same as throwing money into the street. At dinner, they did not talk about their days in the soft, rambling way that most families do. They talked about systems, about efficiency, about what was working and what was wasting energy, and how to tell the difference. Marcus absorbed every word of it. He arrived at MIT at 17 years old, younger than almost everyone around him, and discovered something important in his very first week on campus. Being the smartest person in the room was not actually the goal. Being the most prepared person in the room, that was the goal. Preparation was something you could control. Smartness was something you were born with and couldn't change. Marcus Tilden was not interested in things he couldn't control. He was interested in edges, margins, the small, invisible advantages that compound over time into enormous outcomes. He double-majored in computer science and economics. He graduated in 3 years. He was not popular. He did not go to parties. He did not have a large group of friends. He had 3 or 4 people whose minds he genuinely respected, and a deep, unsentimentally organized calendar that he reviewed every morning before he did anything else. His classmates found him cold. He found them imprecise. His first company, Gridline, was a logistics software platform that helped mid-sized shipping companies reduce fuel costs by optimizing delivery routes in real time. It was not a glamorous idea. It was not the kind of startup that gets written up in breathless TechCrunch profiles about changing the world. It was a practical solution to a real problem. built with clean code and no wasted features. He sold it in 2008 for $210 million. He was 28 years old. He did not celebrate. He went home, opened his laptop, and started a new document titled, "What I Learned. What I'd Do Differently. What's Next?" That document is now 47 pages long. He still adds to it. Tilden Capital Group opened its doors in Palo Alto in 2013, in a modest office on Page Mill Road. Not one of the flashy Sand Hill Road addresses that venture capital firms chase like status symbols, but a quiet, functional space with good light and a conference room that fit exactly 8 people. 8 was the right number, Marcus had decided. More than 8, and conversations get diluted. Fewer than 8, and you lose the friction that surfaces bad assumptions. In 11 years, Tilden Capital has made 47 investments. 31 have been profitable. 9 have been what the industry calls home runs, companies that returned 10 times the investment or more. Among them, a cybersecurity firm that was acquired by Microsoft in 2019, a supply chain analytics company that went public in 2021, and a healthcare data platform that was named by Fast Company as one of the most innovative companies in America in 2022. Only 3 investments have been total losses. Those are genuinely exceptional numbers. There are partners at the most famous firms on Sand Hill Road who would trade their track records for Marcus Tilden's track record without thinking twice. He is not a fool. He is not careless. He is not even, at his core, an unkind person. The people who have worked for him longest will tell you that he is fair, that he keeps his word, that he never takes credit for other people's ideas in a room, which is rarer in venture capital than it should be. But he is something else too, something that years of being right have quietly built inside him, the way rust builds on a pipe, slowly, invisibly, until one day the pressure changes and the whole thing gives. He is certain. Not arrogant in the loud, obvious way that is easy to identify and easy to dismiss. Certain in a quieter, more dangerous way. The way a surgeon becomes certain after 10,000 successful operations. The way a pilot becomes certain after 30 years without an incident. A deep, structural certainty that lives in the bones and bypasses the part of the brain that asks, "But what if I'm missing something?" Marcus Tilden walks into rooms and he scans them. Fast. He identifies, in seconds, who the players are and who the passengers are. He has been doing this for 20 years. He has been right enough times that the habit has calcified into instinct, and the instinct has calcified into something he doesn't even think of as a choice anymore. It just happens. He walks in. He scans. He decides. This morning, at 9:47 a.m., inside the Moscone Center, the scan took 3 seconds. One man in a navy blazer, carrying a leather notebook. No entourage. Athlete. Celebrity guest. Not here for business. Turn. Move on. What Marcus Tilden does not know, what he cannot know, because he stopped being curious 3 seconds in, is that the man he just dismissed has been building something in Silicon Valley for years, quietly, methodically, in the same way he once built a jump shot in an empty gym in Charlotte, long after everyone else had gone home. Marcus does not know about SC30 Inc. He does not know about the Andreessen Horowitz partnership. He does not know that in October 2023, Forbes published a profile naming Curry as one of the most sophisticated early-stage tech investors of his generation, distinguished from other athlete investors by his specific, studied focus on fintech and health technology. Marcus missed that piece. He doesn't read Forbes profiles of athletes. And here, right here, is where the story turns on its quietest, sharpest hinge. Because there is a company called Bridgeway Technologies, and Marcus Tilden wanted into that company very badly. And the reason he was turned away, the reason his term sheet was politely declined in January 2024, with a confidentiality agreement that kept him from knowing why, is sitting 17 feet in front of him in the 3rd row. Notebook open, pen moving, watching the stage, waiting. It is a word that means different things depending on where you learned it. For some people, waiting is passive. It is sitting still with your hands folded while life decides what to do with you. It is the thing you do when you have no other choice. For other people, the ones who grew up without the safety net, without the connections, without the room that automatically opens its doors when they arrive, waiting is something completely different. Waiting is a strategy. Derek Nwosu learned that difference early. He grew up on 73rd Avenue in East Oakland, in a neighborhood that the tech industry has been promising to transform for 15 years without quite getting around to it. The house he grew up in had 3 bedrooms and 5 people. His father worked overnight shifts at an Amazon fulfillment center in Tracy, California, driving 40 minutes each way, sleeping during the days when Derek and his 2 younger sisters came home from school. His mother did bookkeeping for 3 small businesses in the neighborhood, a hair salon, a tax preparation office, and a Jamaican restaurant that smelled so good it made the whole block hungry on Saturday mornings. Money was not a crisis in Derek's house. It was a constant conversation. Every dollar had a destination. Every expense was discussed. His mother kept a ledger, a real paper ledger, not a spreadsheet, not an app, that she updated by hand every evening at the kitchen table after dinner. Derek used to sit across from her and watch her write. He didn't know it then, but he was learning something that no business school would ever teach him as cleanly as his mother taught it at that kitchen table. Every number tells a story. You have to know how to read it. He was the first person in his family to go to a 4-year university, UC Berkeley, class of 2008, economics major. He took the bus to campus his first 2 years because he couldn't afford a car and was too proud to ask his parents for one. He wore the same 4 dress shirts in rotation to every professional event and networking session, washing them by hand on Sunday nights and hanging them to dry over the shower rod. He graduated with honors and a plan. The plan was to build a fintech company that helped people like his mother, small business bookkeepers, neighborhood accountants, the invisible financial infrastructure of working-class communities, access better software tools at prices that didn't assume you were already a medium-sized corporation. He started building in 2010, from a studio apartment on 35th Avenue in Oakland, on a $12,000 personal loan from a credit union that his mother had been a member of for 19 years. The first startup failed, not dramatically. Not with a big public collapse that gets written up as a cautionary tale. It failed the quiet way that most startups fail. Slowly, then completely. Like a phone battery that you keep thinking has enough charge, until suddenly it doesn't. The product was genuinely good. The timing was wrong. The market wasn't ready for what he was building, or wasn't ready to trust that someone from 73rd Avenue in East Oakland was the one building it. He ran out of money in early 2012. He lost the $12,000. He lost another $40,000 he had borrowed from family, his parents, 2 aunts, and a cousin who had believed in him without asking too many questions. He spent the next 6 months driving for a rideshare company and doing late-night grocery delivery shifts, paying everyone back $20 at a time, carrying a shame so dense and so private that he didn't talk about it to anyone for 3 years afterward. He tried again in 2013. The second startup moved faster and failed more gracefully. He had learned from the first one. He ran lean, stayed honest about the numbers, and when it became clear that the runway was gone, he sold the intellectual property for enough money to clear his debts and start again with something he hadn't had before. A clean slate, and a very specific kind of knowledge that you can only earn by failing in front of the people who believed in you, and then rebuilding yourself without asking them to watch. The third time, he didn't build a startup. He made a different decision, quieter, less romantic, harder to explain at dinner parties, and joined a small investment firm called Meridian Ventures, based in Oakland, as a junior analyst. He was 31 years old. He was older than everyone else at his level by at least 4 years. Some of his new colleagues had never heard of 73rd Avenue. Some of them had gone to schools that cost more per year than his father made in 3. He didn't say much about any of that. He just worked. Within 4 years, he was managing director. In September 2023, Derek attended a fintech conference in Atlanta, the Ascend Capital Forum, held at the Marriott Marquis in downtown Atlanta, the kind of event that draws mid-size investors and early-stage founders who haven't yet been discovered by the big Sand Hill Road firms. He almost didn't go. The flight was expensive, and his calendar was already impossible, and he told himself 3 times in the week before that he would cancel and watch the recorded sessions online. He didn't cancel. At 2:15 in the afternoon on the second day, a 29-year-old woman walked onto the small side stage in Conference Room C. Not the main stage, not the keynote room, but the smaller room that was maybe a third full, and gave a pitch that stopped Derek Nwosu completely mid-bite of a conference sandwich. Her name was Amara Osei, and what she was building was the most important thing Derek had seen in 10 years of sitting in rooms like this one. He introduced himself before she had finished packing up her laptop. He had 3 questions. She had 3 answers. By the end of that conversation, Derek knew exactly one thing with total certainty. This needs to get to Steph. Not because Derek was starstruck. Not because he thought attaching a famous name to a good company was the same thing as making it successful. He had watched that movie before and knew how it ended. The celebrity takes the photo, cashes the check, and moves on. And the founder is left holding a company that got attention without getting built. This was different. This needed Steph Curry specifically, for reasons that had nothing to do with his jersey number and everything to do with what Derek had spent the last 2 years quietly learning about how SC30 Inc. actually operated. But getting there would take time. And in the meantime, there was a tech summit to survive. The morning sessions at the Pacific Horizon Tech Summit move the way these things always move, in a long, well-catered blur of slides and conviction. There is a panel at 9:15 a.m. on artificial intelligence regulation, featuring 3 people who disagree with each other in the careful, qualified way that people disagree when they know they will need each other's phone numbers afterward. There is a keynote at 10 a.m. on the future of climate technology that is genuinely good, sharp data, honest about the hard parts, delivered by a founder named Yael Brennan, whose solar logistics company just closed a $90 million Series C, and whose slides are so clean they make the audience feel slightly bad about their own presentations. There is excellent catering. There is terrible coffee, the kind that comes from an urn and has been sitting since 7:30 a.m. Throughout all of it, Steph Curry sits in the 3rd row. He does not check his phone between sessions. He does not lean over to whisper to a neighbor. He watches each panel with the same focused, unhurried attention he gives to game film. Not passive watching, but active reading. The kind where you are pulling the information apart in real time and putting it back together in a new shape. He asks his first question at 9:52 a.m. during the AI regulation panel. It is not the question anyone expects. He does not ask about basketball. He does not ask about his own investments or his own profile. He asks the panelist on the far left, a tech policy professor from Stanford named Dr. Claudia Ferreira, about the specific mechanisms by which proposed federal AI regulations would affect alternative credit scoring models in community banking. Dr. Ferreira pauses for 2 full seconds before answering. Not because the question is unanswerable, because it is precise. It is the question of someone who has done the reading, located the gap, and gone straight to it without decorating it first. A woman 2 rows behind Steph leans toward her colleague and whispers something. Her colleague nods slowly. In the 5th row, Marcus Tilden does not notice any of this. He is reviewing notes on his phone. At 11 a.m., Marcus takes the stage. His keynote is titled, "The Discipline of the Early Bet," and it is, by any honest measure, very good. He is a clean speaker. No filler words, No unnecessary pauses, no performed humility that doesn't match the content. He talks about 3 of his biggest investment wins and what he saw in each company before the market saw it. He talks about pattern recognition. He talks about the courage it takes to move fast when the data is still thin and the consensus hasn't formed yet. He talks about knowing a winner the moment you see one. The audience is engaged. There is genuine applause at 2 points before he even finishes. Marcus Tilden on a stage is a completely different creature from Marcus Tilden scanning a room. Up there, all the precision and the certainty become assets, become performance, become the thing people paid $25,000 to witness and absorb. In the third row, Steph Curry listens to every word. He writes something in his notebook. He does not look up while he writes it. He does not look smug or amused or bothered. He looks exactly the way he looks on a basketball court when his team is down by 6 points in the fourth quarter and the other team is celebrating a little too early. Calm, present, certain about something the other side hasn't figured out yet. The lunch break arrives at 12 p.m. 600 people move toward the catering stations in the way that conference crowds always move, in slow, circling clusters, half of them still mid-conversation, the other half scanning the room for the specific person they came here to find. At 12:15 p.m., a junior partner from Tilden Capital, named Theo Gallagher, spots Steph near the food stations and does what 29-year-olds who are not yet important enough to have developed bad habits do. He walks straight over and introduces himself. Theo is earnest in a way that his firm does not particularly reward, but has not yet managed to train out of him. He grew up in Akron, Ohio, same city as LeBron James, a fact he mentions to approximately nobody in professional settings, because he has learned that it makes him sound like he is trying too hard. "Are you the Steph Curry?" Theo asks, grinning wide. Steph laughs. "A real one. Depends on the context," he says. They talk for 6 minutes. Steph asks Theo how he got into venture capital. Not as small talk, as a real question, with follow-up questions that prove he is listening to the answers. Theo, who almost never talks about this at work, where the expected biography involves prestige schools and inevitable trajectories, tells him the real story. His father owned a small hardware store in Akron. A good store, well-run, genuinely loved by the neighborhood. When Theo was 16, his father tried to expand. A second location, 2 more employees, a small commercial loan to cover the renovation costs. The bank said no, not because the business wasn't profitable, not because the plan wasn't solid, because the credit score didn't clear the threshold and the collateral wasn't quite enough, and the system that was supposed to help small businesses grow had a very specific idea of which small businesses deserved to grow. The store never expanded. It closed 4 years later, not from failure but from the slow erosion of a dream that didn't get the fuel it needed when it needed it. Theo went into venture capital because he wanted to understand who controls the fuel. Steph listens to all of it, without interrupting once. When Theo finishes, Steph is quiet for a moment. Then he says, very simply, "That's exactly the problem worth solving." He means it completely. Theo doesn't know why those 6 words land so heavily in his chest. He will think about them for weeks afterward, not because they are complicated, but because they are said by someone who is not performing sympathy. Someone who has already done something about it. At 12:31 p.m., Marcus Tilden walks past. He sees Theo talking to someone. He gives a brisk nod in the general direction without breaking stride. He does not stop. He does not recognize the someone. Or perhaps he does, and the 3-second scan fires again, and the conclusion is the same as it was at 9:47 this morning. Passenger. Move on. Derek Nwosu, sitting at a corner table 20 feet away, with a plate of food he has barely touched, watches the entire sequence. Marcus walking past. The nod. The not stopping. He picks up his pen. He opens his notebook to a fresh page. He writes one word. Soon. Then he closes the notebook, pushes his plate aside, and checks his watch. 1 hour and 58 minutes. The envelope is still on the stage. Still sealed. Still waiting. Just like the man in the third row has been waiting his entire life, for exactly the right moment to open. But before that moment comes, you need to meet the person who made it possible. Not Steph. Not Derek. The woman who built the thing inside the envelope. Amara Osei does not remember much about Accra, Ghana, before she left it. She was 9 years old when her family packed what they could carry and moved to Columbus, Ohio, in the spring of 2004. What she remembers is not the house or the neighborhood or even her school. What she remembers is the smell of her grandmother's kitchen on Sunday mornings, groundnut soup and fresh bread, and the sound of her father's laugh, which was the kind of laugh that filled a room completely, the kind that made strangers turn around and smile without knowing why. That laugh got quieter after they arrived in America. Not because her father was unhappy. He was not unhappy. He was grateful and determined and fiercely, stubbornly optimistic in the way that immigrants often are, carrying hope like a tool, using it deliberately, refusing to put it down even when it gets heavy. But the system was heavy. Getting a bank account took 2 years. 2 years of rejections and requirements and documents that required other documents that required other documents. Her father drove a taxi, someone else's taxi, for a company that took 40% of every fare. Because without a bank account and without an established credit history, getting a small business loan to buy his own vehicle was simply not possible. He was not a bad risk. He was an invisible one. Amara was 9 years old when she learned that in America, being invisible to a system was sometimes more dangerous than being seen by it in the wrong way. She did not forget. She studied computer science at Ohio State University, graduated in 2016, and spent 3 years at a fintech company in New York, learning how the existing financial infrastructure was built, which problems it was designed to solve, which problems it was designed to ignore, and most importantly, which problems it was designed to ignore while pretending it had never noticed them. She quit in 2020, not angrily, deliberately. She moved back to Columbus, found a shared workspace on High Street 2 miles from the Ohio State campus, and started building Bridgeway Technologies on a whiteboard, 3 laptops, and a conviction so specific it almost had a shape. The conviction was this: the credit score system was not broken. It was working exactly as designed. It was designed for people who already had credit history, who already had bank accounts, who already existed inside the financial infrastructure. It was not designed for her father. It was not designed for the Haitian contractor in Miami who paid his suppliers in cash because that was how his community handled money. It was not designed for the Somali restaurant owner in Minneapolis whose family lending circle had a perfect repayment record that no credit bureau had ever seen. Bridgeway would see them. It would build alternative credit profiles using rent payment history, utility payments, mobile money records, and community lending data. The financial fingerprints that the traditional system walked past without looking down. Then it would connect those profiles to community banks and credit unions willing to underwrite loans that the big institutions wouldn't touch. By the time Derek Nwosu heard her pitch in Atlanta in September 2023, Bridgeway had already been operating for 2 years. The numbers were not venture scale yet, not the kind of numbers that make Sand Hill Road partners lean forward in their chairs. But they were something rarer and, to the right investor, more valuable than early hockey stick growth. They were real. 14,000 small business owners served. $380 million in loans facilitated. A 94% repayment rate, statistically higher than the national average for traditional small business loans, which was the number that stopped Derek mid-bite of his conference sandwich in Atlanta and made him put the sandwich down and pick up his pen. Because that number told a story that the traditional system had been telling itself was impossible. That the people it excluded were not excluded because they were bad risks. They were excluded because nobody had bothered to measure them correctly. Derek spent 3 months after Atlanta doing something that nobody paid him to do and nobody asked him to do. He helped Amara rebuild her pitch deck. Not the product. The product was already right, but the story around it, the way it was framed for the specific investors Derek had in mind. The language that would make someone who had spent 20 years inside Silicon Valley's financial culture understand immediately what they were looking at. He knew exactly who he was building the pitch for. He had spent 2 years watching SC30 Inc. from a careful distance, reading every public statement, every interview, every investment announcement. He had studied what Steph's team responded to and what they passed on. He had noticed a pattern that most people missed because most people were not looking for it. SC30 Inc. did not invest in ideas. It invested in truths, problems that were real and specific and personal, built by founders who had lived inside the problem before they decided to solve it. Amara had lived inside this problem since she was 9 years old in Columbus, watching her father drive someone else's taxi. That was not a pitch angle. That was the whole story. Derek made the introduction in October 2023. By February 28, 2024, in a conference room in Menlo Park, Steph Curry had signed the paperwork making SC30 Inc. the lead investor in Bridgeway's $40 million Series B round, committing $22 million and taking a seat on the board of directors. The confidentiality agreement held until today, until the envelope. Until 2:30 p.m. Amara walks to the backstage area at 1:45 p.m. She is wearing a deep green dress and her natural hair, and the specific expression of someone who has worked so hard for so long on something they love that the moment of arrival feels less like joy and more like gravity, like something that was always going to happen, finally accepting that the time has come. She finds Steph Curry backstage. He is standing completely still, reading something on his phone, with the calm of a man who has been in big moments so many times that the adrenaline stopped surprising him years ago. He looks up when he hears her footsteps. "You good?" he asks. She laughs, a short, tight laugh that is mostly exhale. "Ask me in an hour. You've been ready since Columbus," he says. "I've read every version of that pitch deck. You were ready on version 1. She shakes her head. "Version 1 was terrible. Version 1 was honest," he says. "That's harder to find than you think." They stand quietly for a moment. Two people from completely different worlds, connected by a problem that both of them understood before they ever met each other, standing backstage at one of the most powerful rooms in American business, 45 minutes away from changing what that room thinks it knows. Steph straightens his blazer. Amara takes one slow breath. "Let's go," he says. And for a moment, standing in the narrow backstage corridor of the Moscone Center, with the noise of 600 people filtering through the curtain, those two words carry the weight of everything that came before them. Every empty gym in Charlotte, every scout who wrote too small, every rejection letter from every college program that couldn't see past the size of his body to the size of his mind, every 3-second dismissal in every room that decided, fast and wrong, what kind of person he was. Every taxi ride Amara's father took in someone else's car. Every loan application Derek's mother never filed because she already knew the answer. Every version of the pitch deck. Every late night in the Columbus workspace. Every number in every ledger kept by hand at a kitchen table in Oakland. 2 words. Let's go. At 2:28 p.m., the main hall of the Moscone Center fills back to capacity. The afternoon energy is different from the morning. People have eaten. The coffee has been refreshed. The conversations during the lunch break have loosened something in the room. There is more movement, more noise, more of the electric, competitive aliveness that these events build toward in their final hours. Nobody knows exactly what the sealed envelope contains. The speculation during lunch had been varied and mostly wrong. A major acquisition announcement, a new fund launch, a government partnership of some kind. One table near the back had decided, with complete confidence, that it was a SpaceX secondary market announcement. They were very sure about this. They were very wrong. Cassandra Hull, the summit's moderator, a former technology journalist who has been running this event for 6 years with the calm authority of someone who genuinely loves the work, walks to the center of the stage at exactly 2:30 p.m. The room quiets faster than it usually does for afternoon sessions. Something about the envelope. Something about the way Cassandra is standing. Not performing anticipation, but actually feeling it, which is rarer and more contagious. She picks it up. "This morning," she says, her voice carrying cleanly to every corner of the hall, "I told you this envelope contained the day's most important announcement. Before I open it, I want to tell you about the company inside it. Not who is behind it, not the money, the company itself. Because if you understand what it has actually done, the rest of it will mean something more than a number." She describes Bridgeway Technologies. She gives the numbers slowly, deliberately. The way you read something aloud when you want the weight of each word to land separately before the next one arrives. 14,000 small business owners. $380 million in loans. 12 states. A 94% repayment rate. Higher than the national average for traditional small business loans, underwritten by the largest banks in the country. She talks about what that repayment rate means. It means the people this system was built to serve. The ones the traditional system turned away. The ones the credit score algorithm rendered invisible are not bad risks. They never were. They were simply unmeasured risks. And the difference between those two things is the entire moral and financial argument for Bridgeway's existence. The room is very still. Marcus Tilden, seated in the 5th row, is leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He knows this company. He wanted into this round. He was turned away in January with a polite email and a confidentiality clause that told him nothing except that the round was closed. He has spent 2 months assuming he was outbid by a larger fund. His jaw is tight. His mind is already running the math on what a 94% repayment rate at this scale means for the Series C valuation. The Series B round for Bridgeway Technologies, Cassandra says, holding the envelope at her side now, was $40 million. She slides her finger under the seal. The room holds its breath, in the specific way that rooms hold their breath when something is about to become permanently true, when the before and the after are separated by a single sentence. She opens it, she reads it, she looks up. The lead investor, she says, providing $22 million and joining Bridgeway's board of directors. She pauses, not for drama, but because she genuinely wants the name to land in silence, is Steph Curry, through his firm, SC30 Inc. The room does not explode. It doesn't make the sound a stadium makes when a buzzer beater drops at the final horn. That sudden, physical, animal roar. These are not stadium people. These are people who have trained themselves to process surprise without showing it on their faces, because showing surprise in professional rooms is a way of advertising what you didn't know. But surprise cannot always be contained. It moves through the room like a current, a sharp, collective inhale that starts at the front rows and travels backward in a wave, followed by a murmur that begins at the edges and moves to the center and builds into something that is not quite applause yet, but is becoming it. Steph walks out from backstage. He walks out next to Amara Osei, and the two of them cross the stage together, and they shake hands at the center podium, and the room applauds, genuinely, fully, the kind of applause that contains real information about how people feel. Marcus Tilden does not applaud immediately. He is doing what he always does, running numbers, recalculating, placing new information inside the framework that has governed his professional life for 20 years. He is fast at this. He is very good at this. But this time, the recalculation hits something the framework was not built to handle. Because the numbers are not the problem. The numbers are extraordinary. $22 million lead position in a company with a 94% repayment rate and $380 million in facilitated loans and room to scale nationally, that is an investment he would have made himself. That is exactly the kind of bet his keynote this morning was about. The discipline of the early bet, the courage to move when the data is still thin, and the consensus hasn't formed. Steph Curry moved when nobody in this room was watching. And Marcus Tilden, the man who prides himself on seeing things before others see them, on knowing a winner the moment he walks into a room, turned his back on him. Twice, 4 seconds after everyone else has started clapping, something shifts on Marcus Tilden's face. The certainty, that deep, structural, bone-level certainty that 20 years of being right had built into him, falters. Just for a moment, just long enough to be real. He goes still. On stage, Steph speaks for 7 minutes. He talks about his mother, Sonia Curry, and how she managed the family finances in Charlotte with a precision and intentionality that had nothing to do with the amount of money available and everything to do with the respect she gave every dollar that passed through her hands. He talks about a Vietnamese bakery owner in Houston named Lin, who had been in business for 11 years, had never missed a supplier payment, and was denied a loan to buy a second oven because her credit file was 18 months too thin. He talks about a Haitian contractor in Miami named Edouard, who had completed 200 jobs without a single complaint, whose customers wrote him letters, whose community trusted him completely, and who could not get the capital to hire 2 more workers and take on larger contracts. He talks about a Somali restaurant owner in Minneapolis whose family lending circle had a perfect repayment record going back 9 years. 9 years of community trust, documented and consistent, that no credit bureau had ever recorded as evidence of anything at all. He talks about Davidson College, and what Bob McKillop saw in him that the recruiting services missed, and what it meant to be measured correctly by someone who was willing to look past the surface number. He never looks at Marcus Tilden. He doesn't need to. The work is speaking. It is speaking very loudly. And in the 5th row, Marcus Tilden is finally, fully listening. Not to the applause, not to the room, to something quieter and more uncomfortable than either of those things. The sound of his own assumptions collapsing, one by one, in the ordered and precise way that well-built structures collapse when the foundation turns out to have been wrong all along. He has heard that sound before. He has just never heard it about himself. The afternoon break begins at 3:10 p.m. 600 people rise from their seats and move toward the exits, and the coffee stations, and the clusters of conversation that form instantly, the way iron filings move toward a magnet, around the one thing everyone in the room is now thinking about. Steph Curry, SC30 Inc., the $22 million check that nobody saw coming. Marcus moves through the room on autopilot. He says the right things. He nods at the right moments. He shakes 3 hands and accepts a business card and answers a question from a journalist, not Priya Menon, who he can see across the room already typing rapidly into her phone with the focused urgency of someone who knows exactly what kind of story she is sitting inside, with the careful, composed fluency of a man who has been managing his public image in professional rooms for 2 decades. Underneath all of it, he is somewhere else entirely. He is back at 9:47 this morning. 3 seconds. A turned back. A decision made so fast it barely qualified as a decision at all. More like a reflex, a muscle memory, the automatic output of a system that had been running the same program for so long it had forgotten the program was a choice. Athlete, celebrity, passenger. He tracks down Theo Gallagher at the coffee station at 3:18 p.m. Theo is talking to someone, but reads his boss's expression correctly and excuses himself. He has worked for Marcus for 2 years and has learned to tell the difference between the face Marcus wears when something has gone wrong and the face he wears when something has gone wrong in a way that matters. This is the second face. The man you were talking to at lunch, Marcus says. At the food stations. Theo blinks. Steph Curry. Yes. A pause. What about him? Marcus is quiet for a moment. In the particular way he is quiet when he is choosing words more carefully than usual. Not editing for presentation, but actually thinking, which is a different kind of silence, and Theo has only seen it a handful of times. What did you two talk about? Marcus asks. Theo tells him. He tells him about the hardware store in Akron, about the expansion that didn't happen, about the loan the bank wouldn't give, and the dream that ran out of fuel because the system that was supposed to support it had a very specific idea of which dreams deserved support. He tells Marcus what Steph said when the story was finished. That's exactly the problem worth solving. Marcus is quiet for a long time after that. Not the thinking quiet. Something different. Something that sits heavier and lower in the chest. He said that? Marcus asks. Yeah, Theo says. And then, because he is 29 and not yet important enough to have learned to leave true things unsaid, and I believed him. Marcus nods once. He excuses himself. He walks to the far edge of the hall, near the floor-to-ceiling windows that look out toward the bay. The fog that blanketed the city this morning has burned off completely, and the water is visible now, flat and gray-blue and enormous. The kind of view that makes the room behind you feel suddenly small regardless of how much money is standing in it. He stands there for 3 minutes. He is not a man who does this, who stops, who stands at windows, who allows the workday to pause around him while he looks at water. His calendar does not have space for it. His self-image does not have language for it. But today, it turns out, requires it. He is thinking about a single number, 3 seconds. The amount of time he spent looking at Steph Curry before deciding what he was. 3 seconds, and the scan fired, and the category was assigned, and the man was dismissed, and Marcus turned his back and kept moving, because the system said passenger, and the system had been right so many times before. He built his entire professional identity on the idea that he sees what others miss, that he identifies value before the market does, that he is the one in the room who is paying attention at the level that matters. He told 600 people that this morning, from a stage. The discipline of the early bet. Knowing a winner the moment you see one. He said those words at 11 a.m. At 9:47 a.m., he had turned his back on the most important investor in the room. The gap between those two things, between what he said he was and what he actually did, is not a gap Marcus Tilden has any framework for. His whole system is built on the assumption that the gap doesn't exist, that the pattern recognition is reliable, that the instinct can be trusted. He stands at the window and he does not have a solution for this, which is itself an unfamiliar feeling. Marcus Tilden always has a solution. That is the whole point of Marcus Tilden. He turns away from the window. He finds Derek Nwosu, before Derek finds him. This matters. Marcus is not a man who seeks out conversations he didn't initiate. His whole professional life has been structured around being the one people come to, not the one who goes. That he crosses the room toward Derek, deliberately, in full view of people who know both of them, says something about what the last 20 minutes at the window produced. You made the introduction, Marcus says. It is not a question. Derek looks at him with the steady, unhurried calm of a man who has been waiting for this conversation for 6 months. Not eagerly, not with stored anger, but with the patience of someone who always knew it would eventually arrive. I made an introduction, Derek says. Amara built the company. Steph made the bet. Marcus holds his gaze. How long have you been trying to get a meeting with me? 6 months, Derek says. 4 emails. 2 LinkedIn messages, 1 voicemail. The number lands exactly the way Derek knew it would. Not like an accusation, but like a fact. Clean, specific, unanswerable. Marcus is quiet for a moment, that feels longer than it is. I'll have my assistant call you Monday morning, he says. Derek looks at him without hurry, without performance, without the eager gratitude that Marcus's office has been trained to expect from people who finally get the meeting they've been requesting. I know, Derek says. Not thank you. Not I appreciate it. Not that means a lot. Just, I know, said with the complete, settled calm of a man who never needed Marcus Tilden's recognition to understand his own value. Who knew, 6 months ago and 6 years ago, and in the studio apartment on 35th Avenue, when the first startup was failing quietly around him, exactly who he was and what he was building toward. Marcus extends his hand. Derek shakes it, and Marcus walks away carrying something he has not carried in a very long time. Not shame, not embarrassment, not the hot, defensive discomfort of a man caught doing something wrong. Something more useful than any of those things. Something that feels, if he is honest with himself, and standing at that window for 3 minutes, has made him more honest with himself than he has been in years. Exactly like the first day of learning something. Small. Not broken small. Not defeated small. Useful small. The kind of small that a person only ever feels when the framework they built their whole world inside turns out to have a room they never knew existed. A room they walked past every day without looking in. That is the thing about blind spots. They are not hidden from you because someone concealed them. They are hidden from you because you stopped turning your head in that direction. Because the habit of not looking became so old and so automatic that you forgot it was a habit at all and started believing it was simply the shape of the world. Marcus Tilden is 44 years old. He has a lot of rooms to walk back through. But that is his story to write, and it will take longer than one afternoon at a tech summit to write it. Right now, there is someone else's story that needs finishing. At 4:47 p.m., while the final sessions of the Pacific Horizon Tech Summit wind down around her, Priya Menon, of The Information, sits in a corner of the Moscone Center's second-floor media room and types without stopping. Priya is 36 years old. She has been covering venture capital and Silicon Valley for 11 years. She has broken stories about fund collapses, boardroom coups, and at least 2 situations that became the subject of later documentaries. She has a reputation in the industry for being rigorous without being cruel, which is rarer than it should be in technology journalism. She noticed Steph Curry at 10:30 this morning. Not because she recognized him immediately, though she did, but because of the way he was sitting. She has spent 11 years in rooms full of important people, and she has developed, over that time, a very specific sensitivity to the difference between someone who is present in a room and someone who is working a room. Steph Curry was working. She made a note. Curry here, working quietly. Something's up? She spent the rest of the morning watching. She watched him ask the question that surprised Dr. Ferreira. She watched him sit through Marcus Tilden's keynote without expression. She watched him talk to Theo Gallagher at the food stations, with the full, unhurried attention of someone who is genuinely listening, and not just performing the act of it. And then she watched the envelope open. And then she watched the 5th row. She did not write down Marcus Tilden's name in her notebook during the announcement. She didn't need to. His name was already in her notebook from this morning, from a note she made during his keynote. A note that now, in the context of what happened at 2:30 p.m., reads like the setup of a joke that took 5 hours to deliver. Tilden, knowing a winner the moment you see one. She does not write a cruel piece. That is not what this story is. She writes a precise one. The piece publishes at 6:23 p.m. The headline reads, "Steph Curry is running one of the most sophisticated investment portfolios in Silicon Valley. And most people still don't know it. It moves fast. Faster than most things Priya has written, and she has written things that moved fast. By 7 p.m., it has been shared 4,200 times across LinkedIn and Twitter. By 8:30 p.m., it has been read by 280,000 people. By the time most of San Francisco goes to sleep, it is the most read piece on the Information's platform for the month. The piece details the Bridgeway deal in full. It describes the SC30 Inc. investment philosophy, the specific, studied focus on fintech and health technology, the preference for founders who have lived inside the problem before deciding to solve it, the patient, unglamorous, deeply researched approach that looks nothing like the celebrity investment narrative the industry assumed when Curry first started showing up in cap tables. It quotes two anonymous sources present at the Pacific Horizon Summit, who describe, without naming him, because Priya is rigorous and fair, a prominent venture capitalist who walked past Curry twice without acknowledgement before the announcement and spent the afternoon break standing alone near the windows, which is not something this particular person is known for doing. Twitter identifies the unnamed figure within 43 minutes. The quote tweets are not kind. Some of them are funny in the way that things are funny when the irony is too perfect to be invented. When a man who gave a keynote about recognizing winners spent the same morning failing to recognize one in the third row. Marcus Tilden turns off his phone notifications at 9:15 p.m. He does not post anything in response. He opens his laptop instead and navigates to a document he has not opened in several months. The 47-page document he started the night he sold Gridline, the one titled, "What I Learned, What I'd Do Differently, What's Next?" He sits with it for a long time. Then he opens a new page at the end. He types the date, March 14th, 2024. He sits there for a while longer, cursor blinking, before he starts to write. In Oakland, Derek Nwosu is on his back porch. The evening air is cool and smells like cut grass and distant rain. He has a glass of water and his own notebook, the same kind of plain, black-covered notebook he has been keeping since he was 24 years old. And a mentor told him, in the weeks after the first startup failed, that if you want to know who you are becoming, you have to write it down and read it back. He writes 3 things he wants to do differently in the next year. His handwriting is small and even, the kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who was taught that the page is not infinite and that precision is a form of respect, for the paper, for the words, for the future self who will read them back. He does not write about Marcus Tilden. He does not write about the summit or the envelope or the look on the fifth row's face when the name was read aloud. He writes about Amara. He writes about the pitch deck, specifically about the moment, in November 2023, when Amara rewrote the opening slide for the 4th time and got it exactly right, and Derek read it on his phone at 11:30 at night and sat up in bed and read it again, because the clarity of it, the honesty of it, the way it said the true thing without decoration or apology, it was the kind of writing that only happens when someone has stopped trying to convince people and started simply telling the truth. He writes about his mother's ledger. He writes about 73rd Avenue. He writes, "The work was always real. The room just needed time to catch up." In a hotel room on the 14th floor of the San Francisco Marriott Marquis on 4th Street, 6 blocks from the Moscone Center, Amara Osei is on a video call. Her father is on the screen. He is sitting at the kitchen table in Columbus, the same kitchen where Amara did her homework every night, where her mother made groundnut soup on Sundays, where the family ate dinner together and talked about the day in a mixture of English and Twi that felt, to Amara, like the most complete language she had ever known. She shows him the announcement. She shows him Priya's article. She shows him the number, $380 million in loans, 14,000 small business owners, and watches his face on the small screen of her laptop. He doesn't say much for a long time. When he does speak, he speaks in Twi, low and steady, and Amara's eyes fill before he finishes the sentence, because she knows what he is saying before the words are complete. He is saying, "Your grandmother would have understood this." He is saying, "This is the thing we came here for." He is saying, in the language that holds more of the truth than English sometimes can, "You saw the invisible people, and you counted them." Amara laughs and cries at the same time, in the way that only happens when something has been a long time coming and finally arrives. Her father's laugh fills the screen, the same laugh that got quieter when they arrived in America in 2004. Tonight, in a kitchen in Columbus, Ohio, it is all the way back. And in a different hotel room, on a different floor, Steph Curry is not on social media. He is on the phone with Aisha. They are talking about their kids' weekend, about whether the youngest needs new cleats or whether the current ones have one more season left, about what time his flight home is tomorrow and whether he should try to make it back for dinner or just accept the late arrival and have something waiting in the oven. Normal things, true things, the best things. He is not thinking about Marcus Tilden. He stopped thinking about Marcus Tilden approximately 4 minutes after the announcement ended, which is roughly how long he has ever given to people who underestimate him before returning his attention to the work. But there is one small thing from today that stays with him a little longer than the rest. Something he hasn't mentioned to anyone. Something written in his notebook, on the page he was writing on during Marcus Tilden's keynote this morning. During the talk about pattern recognition and trusting your instincts, and knowing a winner the moment you see one. He had written 4 words in the middle of an otherwise blank page. He doesn't see me. And underneath it, in the same quiet, unhurried hand, 2 more. Good. 1 word, 4 letters. Written by a man who has spent his entire life being looked past, looked through, and looked over. And who learned, somewhere between Charlotte and Davidson and Oakland and the Chase Center, and every boardroom and every draft evaluation and every 3-second dismissal in every room, that decided too fast. That being unseen is not the same as being unready. It never was. In basketball, a crossover is a specific and beautiful thing. It is not about speed, though speed is part of it. It is not about strength, though strength helps. A crossover works, truly works. The kind that leaves a defender frozen with 1 foot planted in the wrong direction, and the ball already gone. Because of one thing and one thing only: certainty. The defender's certainty. The crossover exploits the moment when a defender has decided, has committed, has leaned so fully into their read of the situation that their body is already moving before the play has finished revealing itself. And in that lean, that half-second of absolute, unquestioned commitment to a conclusion, the ball handler changes direction, and the defender is left standing in the ruins of their own assumption. Steph Curry has done this thousands of times, at Madison Square Garden, at the Staples Center, in NBA Finals games watched by hundreds of millions of people, in the 2024 Paris Olympics, where he carried the United States to a gold medal against France on August 10, 2024, hitting the shots that closed the game in the final minutes with the same calm certainty he brings to everything. The certainty not of arrogance, but of preparation. The certainty of someone who has been in this moment 10,000 times in empty gyms when nobody was watching, and is therefore not surprised to be in it now. He does it with his feet and his eyes, and the impossible, fluid economy of his handle. He does it, it turns out, in conference rooms too. The crossover at the Moscone Center on March 14, 2024, did not happen on a hardwood floor. It happened in a sealed envelope. It happened in the 3 seconds Marcus Tilden spent looking, and the 17 years Steph Curry spent working. It happened in a studio apartment on 35th Avenue in Oakland, where a man failed twice, and kept the ledger, and came back. It happened in a shared workspace on High Street in Columbus, where a woman built a system to count the people the other systems refused to see. It happened in Accra and Charlotte and Newton and Atlanta and Menlo Park, and every room where someone was dismissed in 3 seconds and chose, quietly and deliberately, to let the work answer. The crossover never announces itself. That is the whole point. It looks, from the outside, like nothing is happening. The ball handler is just dribbling. The defender is just watching. The room is just a room. Cold brew coffee and leather briefcases, and $15 million worth of people deciding, in 3 seconds each, who matters and who doesn't. And then the direction changes, and the defender is standing still, and the ball is already somewhere else entirely. By the end of 2024, Bridgeway Technologies is operating in 31 states. By early 2025, it is national. every state. Every community that was invisible to the old system now has a path to the capital it was always capable of handling. Amara Osei is on the cover of Fast Company in March 2025. The headline reads, "The Woman Who Built a Bank for the Invisible." Her father buys 12 copies and mails them to family members in Accra without telling her first. Derek Nwosu is named a full partner at Meridian Ventures in June 2025. The first partner in the firm's history who grew up on the east side of Oakland. He gives a short speech at the announcement dinner. He thanks his mother. He does not mention the studio apartment on 35th Avenue, but the people who know him know it is in every word. Marcus Tilden publishes a piece on LinkedIn in June 2024, carefully written, more honest than his usual register, about the limitations of pattern recognition when the pattern itself is too narrow. He never names the Moscone Center. He never names Steph Curry. But the people who were in that room on March 14th know exactly what the piece is about. To his genuine credit, he means every word of it. And to his further credit, the Monday morning call to Derek Nwosu happens exactly as promised, and the conversation that follows is a real one. Not transformative, not a Hollywood redemption, real, which is, ultimately, better. And Steph Curry flies home to his family on the morning of March 15, 2024. He makes it back in time for dinner. He does not post about the summit. He does not share the Forbes coverage or the information piece or the LinkedIn congratulations that fill his notifications for 3 days. He sits at the table with Ayesha and their children and eats the meal that was waiting in the oven and asks his kids about their day and listens to the answers. Later, he opens his leather notebook to a fresh page. He writes one line, not about the investment, not about the announcement, not about the room that forgot him and then remembered him all at once when the envelope opened. He writes about Lynn, the bakery owner in Houston, who can now afford the second oven. He writes about Edward, the contractor in Miami, who hired 2 new workers last month. He writes about the restaurant owner in Minneapolis whose lending circle, 9 years of perfect repayments, invisible to every system that was supposed to see it, is now a credit history that opens doors instead of closing them. He reads it back. He closes the notebook. He doesn't need the room to remember him. He never did. He just needed the work to be real, the people behind it to be honest, and enough patience, the deep, trained, unshakable patience of a boy shooting in an empty gym long after the janitor started mopping, to wait for the moment when even the most certain defender in the room plants their foot in the wrong direction, and the ball goes somewhere they never saw coming. Because it was never where they were looking, it was always somewhere better. The boy from Charlotte who learned to be invisible turned out to be the most important person in the room. He just waited for the room to figure that out. And that is the story of the day. A billionaire turned his back on the most important person in the room. 3 seconds. That is all it took to make the biggest mistake of his professional life. But here is what we want you to take away from this story today. Steph Curry did not win because he was loud. He did not win because he fought back or proved anyone wrong in the moment. He won because he kept his head down, did the work, and let the truth speak for itself when the time was right. And the truth always speaks eventually. So wherever you are right now, whether you are someone who has ever been looked past, talked over, or dismissed in 3 seconds by someone who thought they already knew what you were, this story is for you. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from today? Drop your city, your country, your corner of the world in the comments right now. We read every single one, and we would love to know where our family is watching from. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, if it reminded you to never count someone out before you know their whole story, please take 1 second and hit that like button right now. That one small tap tells us to keep making stories like this one. And if you believe that kindness, patience, and quiet determination deserve to be celebrated, subscribe to this channel and join a community that is here to spread exactly that. One story at a time. one person at a time. The next video is on your screen right now. Click it. We promise it is worth your time.